So I'm here in one of the Granada most famous squares, Plaza de las Pasiegas, beside the cathedral. And well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about an interesting topic, maybe an interesting topic for you that might be of interest to you, and perhaps you can learn something about where to focus when you see a high quality classical guitar. So the topic I had in mind is the title is what I focus on when evaluating a guitar. This is a question I get asked often. What parameters or qualities do I focus on? What elements are crucial when assessing a guitar? The first thing to understand, and it's worth to mention, I think, is that the guitar is a musical instrument. Worth to mention from the very beginning. And its sound is the most important factor. The sound it produces is what allows us to express ourselves through it and through music. The sound it produces is what reaches us inside. I mean, it's the most important thing. I have tried hundreds and hundreds of guitars during my life. I don't know around how many, but many of all kinds, historical from nowadays, modern construction, traditional construction, all kind of woods. But to give you a concise example of the importance of the sound in a guitar, well, I have been a jury member at the International Guitar Making Competition in Granada since 2017. In fact, the last edition was just days before. And over the years, we've seen many guitars from all over the world in that competition. And when it comes to time to decide who will win the competition, the decision is always based, of course, on the sound, on which guitar has the best, on which guitar has the best sound. If several guitars have passed, let's say, the construction analysis, everything is in order, the angles are correct, the craftsmanship is solid, and the instrument is easy to play, of course, then we, the jury, turn to the sound, which is the main thing. We evaluate the guitar's projection, the proper sustain of the notes, and that, as we say in Spain, que el sonido no se venga abajo, the sound doesn't fall apart, that it holds up with balance, with projection. Of course, we see the beauty of the sound very much. Projection is different from volume. My friend, the guitarist Antoine Guerrero, in his interview in this channel, he explains about it there. Very interesting interview. I suggest you to listen to it. A guitar might sound loud when you are 1 or 2 meters away, but then the sound doesn't reach far well when you are at the back of a concert hall 15, 20 or 30 meters away. It's a kind of a phenomenon that at first seems impossible, but that's how it is. Try it yourself if you have several guitars, and you'll see that some project better than others. They reach far away better than others. Even if when listening from a meter away or playing them yourself, that might not seem to be the case. Of course, if the guitar is unplayable due to construction flaws, incorrect angles, or structural deformations over time, then as we say in Spain, apaga y vámonos, similar to saying like a game over. If the guitar cannot be played and that problem cannot be repaired, it loses its purpose as a musical instrument. At that point, it might serve as a decorative object or a museum piece or a guitar for studying the guitar maker's way of making, but it's no longer fit for its main purpose, which is musical expression. Now, let's imagine I'm evaluating a guitar for the first time. What's my process for forming an opinion on its quality? When I first see a guitar, it's often from distance. The guitar is there, 1 or 2 meters away. Even at this stage, there are many things the instrument can tell you. For example, you notice the template or shape of the guitar, known as the plantilla, chosen by the guitar maker. Does this shape appeal to you? Does it feel balanced and aesthetically pleasing to you? Is the guitar too large or too small for your preferences? First impressions of the guitar's visual design matter. But it's essential also to remain open-minded. If you don't find its appearance appealing, that shouldn't automatically lead you to dismiss its sound or playability. It's difficult, but need to avoid letting a negative visual impression prejudice your overall evaluation about sound and playability and so on. It's kind of a really psychological issue, but I've so many times one of my clients hasn't even played the guitar, but from an aesthetic point of view, they already don't like it. Most of the time, that strongly influences how they judge everything else. There's already a tendency to say they don't like the sound either, or to take the guitar out and see it from a negative perspective. The other way around, it also happens that you like very much the guitar look and you play the guitar like with a tendency that you will like the sound too, the sound is amazing or whatever. I'll share a personal example. Have you ever seen modern guitars with that hole on the side? This feature apparently is meant to enhance how the guitarist hears the instrument and other things, I don't know. But for me, it's a major turn off. It's a design choice and an element introduced on the guitar I strongly dislike, honestly speaking. And I have to make a conscious effort not to let this detail cloud my judgment when assessing the guitar's other qualities. I know it's a bias I need to overcome to evaluate the instrument in a fair way. I've often heard from both guitarists and guitar makers say that the aesthetic side of a guitar doesn't matter so much to them. That what really counts is the sound. And of course, we completely agree that sound is the most important thing in a guitar, of course. But does aesthetics matter? Of course it does, in my opinion. First of all, the guitar, you are going to in many cases see it every day or every week, or you want something you like to see, that it's beautiful for you. You as a guitar maker, you are already influencing someone's perception through their eyes, making them like and desire your guitar. We are drawn to aesthetics, to art, to beauty, to good taste and good craftsmanship. We like having a beautiful guitar at home, something we are proud to own, something that's been built to the highest standard, striving for perfection and visual harmony. A rosette that's been originally designed and made by the guitar maker, a headstock that matches the rest of the instrument, that every part matches the rest of the instrument, that all belong to a particular style, a body shape, a plantilla, the template that feels balanced and appealing. All these things matter. We are drawn to the details, to the precision with which each part has been crafted, to how the maker has mastered the tools and worked the wood with his hands with care and sensitivity. And let me tell you something else. When a guitar is exceptionally well made, those with deep experience and knowledge and that know where to focus to see the quality of a guitar will value it more. They'll speak more highly of the guitar and the maker's work, and many people rely on the opinions and advice of these, let's say, experts when buying a guitar, which means your work will gain more recognition and more people will want it. More people will talk better about your guitar, not to mention the reputation the guitar maker builds within the craft itself. Being admired and respected by fellow guitar makers for the quality of their works is great for the guitar maker's confidence too. There are many advantages to creating a guitar of truly high quality, also when we talk aesthetically about it. Let's continue with the evaluation of the guitar. From a few meters away, other elements also catch your attention. The headstock design, for instance, is it original, or does it resemble countless others you've seen? I appreciate originality, something unique, but it also needs to be aesthetically pleasing, balanced, and well made, as I said. It must be classical and elegant when it's for a classical guitar, and if it is for flamenco guitar, then in my opinion, must be with some flamenco character. I would say like a strong character, yes, for when it is a flamenco guitar. There are heads design can be good for both style. In relation to this, notice that, for example, here in Granada, Antonio Marín Montero and his nephew José Marín Plazolo use different headstock designed depending on whether the guitar is classical or flamenco. Of course, preferences, there are a lot, and others may feel different, but about these things, you know. The rosette is another key feature when you see the guitar meters away in relation with aesthetic. I prefer rosettes that stand out and make an impression even from a distance. Some rosettes are intricate and beautiful up close, but lose their impact when viewed from afar. You just see some kind of dark circle or just one color there. To me, I like the rosettes even when you see few meters far, you still can see what it's about and some shapes there and design. Take, for example, the rosettes of Manuel Reyes, Miguel Rodriguez, Santos Hernandez, Vicente Arias. The rosettes are recognizable even from a distance. There is an aesthetic projection that makes them stand out. All right, moving to the next step, you pick up the guitar. At this point, you immediately notice its weight, which is a significant aspect in some ways. For some people, weight is crucial. For others, not so much. Some prefer lighter guitars, while others enjoy playing heavier ones. This is purely a matter of personal preference. However, the weight can give you an idea of the guitar's character and the thicknesses used by the luthier during its construction. Most traditional Spanish guitars made by master Spanish guitar makers, historical ones such as Santos Hernandez, Marcelo Barbero, and Domingo Esteso, are lightweight or even very lightweight. So if the luthier who made the guitar in your hands is following that traditional line, the guitar should feel light. For example, if you are holding a Torres-inspired guitar and it feels heavy, something is off there. On the other hand, guitars built using different construction methods like those by the French luthier Daniel Friedrich since the 70s, the one made by him in the 60s, were kind of copies of Torres, so therefore were quite light. But Daniel Friedrich's guitars from the 70s onward tend to be heavier. Many times I found guitars with the Boucher Marin bracing systems, such as those by Antonio Marin or his nephew José Marín Plazuelo, are also slightly heavier than the very traditional ones or more Spanish-related traditional ones. So see how much information you can gather just by looking at a guitar and holding it in one hand. Now let's hold it with both hands. What can we assess here? For example, the balance between the neck and the body. Some guitars feel unbalanced to me. For example, when you position the guitar between your legs, whether in a classical or flamenco posture, but more in the flamenco position, you may notice the neck tilting downward. This imbalance is less noticeable when using a classical foot stand, but it's still a sensation I kind of dislike. Why does the neck feel so heavy? Maybe it has an ebony reinforcements inside, it's heavy, particularly dense cedar wood neck, or an overly thick ebony fingerboard. Perhaps it's a combination of these factors, I don't know. Whatever the reason, I don't like the lack of balance. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I prefer it when everything feels harmoniously balanced. At this point, many people would start maybe playing the guitar right away. Not me. I keep actually inspecting it. I should mention that building a guitar myself gave me a whole new perspective. If I was already attentive to details before, after making a guitar, I became even more observant. I now notice aspects of the guitar that are particularly challenging to craft, for example. I've seen guitars made by very famous guitar makers with mistakes, sometimes even basic ones. These errors don't affect the sound or playability, but reveal that something is uneven, misaligned, or hastily finished. Sometimes you see the guitar maker could have easily fixed the problem there by replacing a piece, redoing a part, or going back a step to correct it, but they didn't. They left it as it was. That mistake or a poorly done piece, this reflects perhaps the personality of some guitar makers. There are those who strive for perfection and cannot rest and sleep in the night until every detail is just right on the guitar. Then there are others who don't seem to care as much. You as a guitarist, also you have the same thing in you. Maybe you care a lot about it or not. Some guitarists, perhaps most of them, are just looking for good playability, good sound, and that's it. At least there are many like that. I remember speaking with my friend Alberto Martinez from Orfeo magazine, who had a good friendship with Daniel Friedrich. Once Alberto visited Friedrich's workshop, and as he was leaving, Friedrich offered him a soundboard as a gift. Alberto happily accepted and asked, "Why are you giving this to me?" Friedrich explained that it had something there, some little mistake Friedrich made on it. When Alberto got home, he carefully examined the soundboard, but couldn't find the flow. Hours later, after repeatedly inspecting it in great detail, he finally noticed something minuscule, a flow so subtle it was barely perceptible. This gives us insight into the personality of certain guitar makers. Some control every aspect of their work to the highest possible standard. And I must say that normally I found that guitar makers who care a lot about details, usually they have a great sound in their guitars. A kind of everything matters, everything is related. And I must say too that I found some guitars with big mistakes, that the sound and playability was really, really good. Some guitars with famous guitar makers, and they have some mistakes. So when I evaluate a guitar, I also examine every detail of the guitar maker's craftsmanship. I like that. I look at the joints of the purflings, the shaping of the neck, ensuring it matches my preferences and how the frets have been placed and inserted and the shape of them. I inspect the heel, a part it is quite difficult to make it perfect, and I look inside the guitar as much as I can, trying to see the work of the guitar maker inside the guitar. I check the angles, such as the neck to soundboard angle. This is crucial for playability, as well as the transverse and longitudinal curves of the soundboard. I do the same for the back. Though, remember, some guitars, some like Hauser's guitars styles are built with a flat soundboard. One of the most critical elements I examine is the bridge. The bridge reveals much about the guitar maker's skill, their mastery over woodworking, their precision, and their sense of elegance. The bridge is one of the most challenging parts of the guitar to construct. And I would say also a very, very important part of the guitar for the sound. There are other parts also that requires the good skills of the guitar maker, such as the heel, for example, as I said before, but I don't know why it seems that the bridge is quite obvious to see that the guitar maker perhaps needs more time to fully develop his skills working with the wood to make a very good work. Also worth mentioning, I think here, that some luthiers now use CNC, computer numerical control machines, for certain guitar components. As a result, where you could once identify a guitar maker's hand craftsmanship, it's now harder to tell how much of the work was done by hand in certain parts that the CNC can make. For example, a CNC can make a bridge or a fretboard. This is something to keep in mind when evaluating modern guitars, something maybe to talk about it in another video. At this stage, I also examine the rosette in close detail. The rosette is arguably the most artistic element of the luthier's work. It's where they leave their signature as artists, I think, in my opinion. I look for a rosette that is aesthetically balanced, with proportion, that convey a sense of harmony and purpose. If there are colors involved, I consider how well they've been combined. A good rosette has personality and character. It should captivate you and draw you in. I also try to discern how it was constructed. Complexity in a rosette can be impressive, but only if the result is beautiful. Some guitar makers creating intricate rosettes, very difficult with a lot of effort, a lot of time, yet the final result lacks taste of harmony. In such cases, you wonder why they went to so much trouble and so many hours of working. On the other hand, there are simple rosettes that are stunningly beautiful, and they are simple, or apparently simple, and even emotionally impactful, and they are just, I repeat, simple ones. For example, a simple rosette that is absolutely beautiful. I found the rosette of the 1867 Torres that Danilo Marrabello made for the Torres copy of his guitar that we have for sale here in Madera Guitarras. Just look how beautiful and apparently simple it is. By the way, what a wonderful sound has this guitar. We have a video there, the young and excellent Greek guitarist Ioanna Kasoglu playing a wonderful piece of the Spanish composer Asencio. Very much worthwhile to listen to. On the other hand, there are complex guitars with extraordinary craftsmanship that are also stunning, like this 1923 Francisco Samplicio. We also have it here at maderaguitarras.com, or this other Torres copy made by Marco Giglioli, also for Madera Guitarras. Personally, I prefer rosettes that feature mosaic work rather than just those with plain herringbone used on it. What puts me off is discovering that the guitar maker didn't create the rosette themselves, but instead they purchased the rosette. That feels like a low blow to me. The rosette is one of the few opportunities for a guitar maker to show their artistic side and his taste, his personality. A rosette that is not made by him is something I very much don't like. Another thing is that he didn't made it himself, but at least he designed it. Then it is more okay. But I still prefer he makes it himself, of course. Also, I pay attention to the level. Yes, the level too. A beautiful level that reflects the luthier's personality is something I always appreciate. Large, clunky levels, or those that seem hastily designed without much thought, are a little bit of a letdown. Let's get now to what truly matters, the sound. Before I start playing, I check the string height of the 12th fret, because the playability I'm going to find is going to be effective for it. I usually ask the guitar maker about the specific measures, and if they are not around, I measure it myself. Actually, when the guitar maker is present, I like to ask them a lot questions about how they build the guitar. I enjoy hearing them talk about it, seeing if they are in love with their creation, proud of it. That tells me a lot. Once I start playing, I begin by randomly plucking notes. I want to hear how the first string sounds, then the second, then the third, and so on, including the bass strings. I check for balance between notes on the same string, ensuring consistency across various registers, several registers. Especially on the high register, I pay attention to the timbre and the guitar's tonal quality by playing simple notes or melodies, the nuances a guitar can produce, the beauty of the sound a guitar can produce. One fundamental aspect I assess is the guitar's ability to produce tonal colors. I experiment with different positions near the bridge, close to the frets, and in the middle, adjusting only the angle of my hand to see if the guitar responds with tonal variations. I like to check the different color a same group of notes of musical phrasing produces in one string or another. I also test vibratos. Some guitars produce beautiful vibratos while others don't. And there are even some that fail to generate vibrato. I saw recently a guitar by now a very famous double top guitar maker which couldn't generate vibratos. It was impressive to see this in a very expensive guitar, very famous guitar. Next, I I move on to chords. Here I evaluate the balance between strings, the separation and clarity of the notes, and whether some strings overshadow others. I also examine the harmonic richness and clarity, ensuring no murmur or unwanted resonant clouds the sound. Sustained notes should be appropriate, not too long, as that can cause the bass to overpower the treble sometimes. Most guitars project bass notes well, but treble sometimes fall short. Of course, I look also for buzzing noises while playing. If those appear, I am with the guitar maker. If I am with the guitar, I ask him to fix that. If not, I have some knowledge to fix them myself, depending on what the problem is. Sometimes when a guitar doesn't project well the trebles, the guitar maker tells me, oh, it's a spruce, so the guitar will project more over time. I accept that the spruce develops with age, of course. Yes, it's like that. However, a spruce guitar should sound excellent from the start also. If it improves further over time, that's great, but it must be good from the very beginning. The topic of sound is vast, with countless nuances and characteristics to explore. It could easily be the subject for several videos. The more guitars you play, the more details and richness you notice. It's similar to wine tasting. You know, sommeliers develop the ability to detect numerous flavors and aromas, but they attended hard courses trying many wines, developing little by little their abilities to recognize aromas. Playing many high-quality guitars sharpens your ability to compare them and appreciate unique features that set one guitar apart from others. This also requires talent, a little bit of talent on the part of the player to perceive and interpret everything the sound carries with it. When it comes to playability, I test the guitar by playing both easy and challenging pieces. Some guitars handle simple pieces without problem. They seem comfortable to play, but with more complex works, their limitations in playability become more evident. Another crucial aspect is intonation. Some guitars don't intonate well, particularly in higher frets. Beyond the 7th or 10th fret, something like that, if the notes and the chords sound off, it could be due to incorrect fret placement or improper compensation at the bridge. Whatever the reason, poor intonation is a deal breaker, unless this problem can be fixed. Finally, the two aspects I care least about are the tuning machines and the strings. If I don't like the tuners, I can simply replace them. Similarly, if the strings don't suit my taste, I can change them for ones I prefer. When evaluating a guitar, if it's not mine, I always ask the owner or guitar maker about the type of string it has, as this can influence the evaluation. Some strings can be excessively bright, so the guitar sound may not inherently be too bright once they are replaced with warmer sounding strings. All these factors and many more go into my assessment of a guitar. If the guitar maker is present, I can spend plenty of time discussing its construction and details, as I say, to list everything I consider would make for an extremely long video, which is my intention here. This one has already become quite long. There is still much more to discuss. The construction of a guitar involves so many elements. For example, we haven't delved into playability, what factors contribute to it, the types of necks I prefer, or how different angles and setups affect the fretboard and the comfort of both hands. Why are there guitars with lower string tension, feeling that offer a sense of flexibility when playing with the right hand, regardless of the tension strings used? Some guitars you feel really good with the right hand, others not. We also haven't talked about tone woods, how to recognize their quality, which ones I consider the best, or the varnish, how to tell if it's well applied. Traditional French polish is incredibly challenging and requires weeks of work. It's practically a second craft that a guitar maker must master if he applies himself the French polish. Of course, the French polish will affect the sound of the guitar too. Almost everything affects the sound. These are all topics for future videos. For now, I hope I've shared enough to catch a little bit of your interest.